Hello, and I'd like to welcome you to our Neurodiversity and Mental Health webinar on behalf of Merseycare's Mental Health Support Team. I'm Louise Hughes. I'm the Whole School Approach and Participation Lead for Merseycare, and these slides have been created in conjunction with Ross Lawton, who's a CBT therapist, the SEND lead, and works for Warrington Mental Health Support Team. So, just before we start anything today, I just want to go over who we actually are. So, the Mental Health Support Team is an NHS service, and we provide mental health support to primary schools and secondary schools in Halton, Knowsley, St Helens, and Warrington. So, we aim to help young people to learn strategies, new ways of taking care of their mental well-being. We provide interventions to pupils struggling with anxiety, low mood, or behavioural difficulties, and we also deliver talks like this one. These activities are things to help provide support for low mood, which we call behavioural activation. We also have an intervention to support worry management in young people, where they learn strategies and help to problem solve practical worries. We have parent-led CBT for anxiety and parent-led behaviour management. We also provide some support for graded exposure, so to support young people to slowly challenge an anxiety around a specific situation. And we also support the whole school approach. So we can provide assemblies, workshops, coffee mornings, training for parents, training for staff, and so on. So this workshop is going to be all about trying to give you a greater understanding of neurodiversity in the context of mental health, and as a service, what we do to support and what you can try to do to kind of bolster your understanding and to be able to support your young person better. So before we start, I just want you to rate yourself on how confident you feel you are out of 10 just surrounding neurodiversity, particularly in the context of mental health. 10 is extremely confident, 0 is not confident at all. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this as a baseline. So at the end of the webinar, we'll go through this again and we'll see if there's been any improvement in your score. Okay, so moving on, I just want to explain what the mental health support team provide to support neurodiversity. So as a service as a whole, we adapt any of our interventions to meet individual needs dependent on their individual presentation. So that's regardless of a young person being neurodiverse. Could be visual aids, social stories, adapting the questionnaires we give, using pictures, symbols, additional sessions, shorter session times, etc. So when referring, we always say to look for a change in the young person's baseline presentation. So they may have already been anxious coming into school, but has this intensified? Are they more unsettled? Are they more tearful? Is there an upcoming transition or change that's making the child or young person worry more? So we do accept and we do assess those with neurodiversity. However, to complete intervention, there has to be a clear mental health need. We also offer parent-led interventions for behaviour, plus the creation of positive behaviour support plans for behaviour support if that's something that is needed. So we're going to start at the beginning with just going over some understandings really of what different neurodiverse presentations are, starting with ASC, ADHD, and general learning disabilities, and moving on to some others. So it's the understanding that human brains have variations in learning and thinking styles. The differences in neurodivergent thinking styles have strengths as well as challenges, and it's always important to remember that there are significant strengths. So if we start with ASC or autism, it's a lifelong developmental condition and it affects how people communicate and interact with the world. It may impact social communication and result in repetitive and restrictive behaviours, sensory processing difficulties. There can be highly focused interests or hobbies, extreme anxiety, and meltdowns or shutdowns. Now, a person does not have to have all of those presentations to be diagnosed as autistic. They can have some, they can have different than those that are on the list. Girls also present differently than boys. This here that I've included on the slide is a really amazing video clip to watch. It's about 5 minutes though, so I'm not going to pop it on for you now, but please, when you have time later, this will be available on our website. Go back and watch. It's amazing things happen and it explains autism in more detail in a really clear, focused, accessible way. So it's a really good clip to watch. Moving on to ADHD. So ADHD is short for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it's a condition that affects people's behavior and internal processing. People with ADHD can seem restless, so they're hyperactive. They may have trouble concentrating, so inattentiveness, and may act on impulse. Many people with ADHD have problems that fall into all of the categories, but this is not always the case. Again, like autism, you can have many of the symptoms or not many of the symptoms. Again, I've included a video. This one is slightly shorter, so I'm just going to play this now just to give you an idea of what ADHD is.
Pay attention to this important message. Did you get any of that? Well, this is how it feels to be me. I have ADHD, which is short for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It's a fancy name for people who find it hard to concentrate, remember things, and organise themselves. But who tend to be really curious, creative, and enthusiastic. Imagine your thoughts are planets and your brain is a spaceship. Most people can navigate it easily. They go where they want, when they want, always at the right speed. For example, slowing down to pay attention in class. My ship often feels out of control, like when my teacher is explaining something and a word reminds me of something else, which makes me think of another thing. My brain keeps connecting ideas at top speed till I'm miles away from where I'm supposed to be. My speedy brain can be frustrating because it doesn't always let me think things through before I do them. Then I feel silly and embarrassed. But ADHD can be an advantage for solving problems. If my brain rocket is pointing in the right direction, I can find solutions faster than other people, and I often think of ideas that nobody else has thought of. I need to move so I can think. Fidgeting, rocking my chair, biting my nails, doodling, even talking. The problem is, adults think I'm choosing not to pay attention, when actually movement is my brain's way of helping me so I don't get distracted. Being so energetic can be an advantage too. I love doing practical jobs and I can be very helpful. I'm endlessly curious and keen to try new activities. My teammates see me as brave, but the truth is that my speedy brain doesn't give me time to think about the risks. When I'm doing things I find interesting, my brain works better. Unfortunately, that's not always the case at school. I often get told off when I'm fidgety or when I've forgotten something. It feels like I can never do anything right, which makes me sad and sometimes angry. I'm usually good at making friends because I'm fun to be around. But sometimes children find me annoying when I don't know when to stop and do silly things without thinking. I feel upset when they don't invite me to things. Maybe their parents are worried because they don't understand ADHD. My doctor gave me medication to help my brain organise my thoughts. Medicine doesn't always work for ADHD people, but luckily it worked for me. The doctor also spoke to my parents, who spoke to my teachers, who spoke to my classmates. And now everyone around me understands about my speedy ADHD brain. They help me point my energy in the right direction, they're more patient with me, and we write down instructions so I don't forget things. They encourage me to take movement breaks and help me make lists and charts so I can organise myself better. 1 in 20 people have ADHD, so you probably already know someone like me. Go and find that person and ask them all about their amazing brain. Hee.
Okay, so that's a really good kind of young person point perspective of what ADHD is for them. Just going to move us on to specific learning difficulties. So, a specific learning difficulty is a neurological condition that affects a person's ability to learn. So it can cause difficulties with reading, writing, spelling, maths. People with specific learning difficulties can also have issues with memory, organisation, and coordination. So you would have heard these referred to as dyslexia, dyspraxia, or dyscalculia. So dyslexia is the struggle with reading words, sounds, memory, and processing. Again, I have included slides, well, not slides, video clips for you to go back over and have a look through in your own time. They're very user-friendly, easy to understand, and break it up a lot easier than I could do in this webinar. So moving on. Okay, dyspraxia. So dyspraxia is when we struggle with movement and coordination, possible difficulties with writing, maybe falling over. Child appears to be very clumsy. You've probably had, if you're a school professional, you would have taught children as you would have taught dyslexia as well. And then dyscalculia is the struggle with number-related concepts and number recall. You do find that many adults, they won't call it dyscalculia, but there does seem to be more of an acceptance of having struggle with number than there is of having struggle with reading, writing, and anything to do with the kind of literacy domain. But dyscalculia is explained more in the video that I've put on here as well. We also have global developmental delay. So this is used when a child takes longer to reach certain development milestones than other children of their age. So for some people, the delay in development will only be short term, and with some additional support or therapy, they will be fine. In other cases, the delay will be more significant and the child may need ongoing support. And this indicates that they may also have a learning disability. So a learning disability affects the way a person learns new things throughout their life, and it is a lifelong condition. So a person must be diagnosed before the age of 18. If this is picked up after 18, it's referred to as an acquired brain injury. I have included another video. It's a very short one, but I think it's very impactful. So I'm just going to play that for you now.
For me, a learning disability means that people will find it hard to be able to learn things first time, and they need time. They need time to understand things.
They might need care and support as well by their parents, by their mum and dad or brother and sister, or their family carers.
Learning disability is a lifelong condition, but I've got a learning disability. But it does not mean that we cannot work just as well as anybody else. Sometimes we can do the job even better.
I actually didn't know what it was till 93. It's just sometimes I'm lucky, sometimes people are impatient.
People with a learning disability, we are like awesome people that can mix. People with a learning disability can do it.
So I just thought that was really profound to show and to share, because it doesn't mean that those young people should be held back. We need to find strategies to be able to incorporate them into the classroom, into everyday life, which moves us on to regulating emotions. Now, every young person at times can find it hard to regulate emotions, as can adults. So if you are neurodiverse, this can be even more difficult. So it's basically the ability to manage your emotions, to calm yourself down when you feel upset, to adjust to change in expectations, to handle a frustration without having a big outburst, and to experience strong emotions without being overwhelmed by them. We usually have three possible reactions to any sort of dysregulation. We might fight, so we shout, we're physically aggressive or defiant. We flight, so we'll consider running away if we can or avoid the situation. Or we freeze, we're unsure what to do, we can't act, and we hide. So it's important to remember a neurodiverse presentation will find regulation even more difficult. And it is difficult to determine whether the young person is struggling with their mental health or their neurodevelopmental condition. So we try to look at the context of the situation. So, for example, if a young person's crying on the way into school, are they worrying about the day in general, or is it because they're overwhelmed due to a sensory input? Is it too noisy? Is it too loud? Is there too many people surrounding them? So neurodiversity is present from birth and is a lifelong condition. Young people and adults who are neurodiverse will fluctuate in their capacity to function and manage daily life. So what we tend to do is look at reasonable adjustments. As you can see on the screen here, we can use visual timetables to help to prepare them for the day, maybe a reduced timetable. Can we have a quieter entrance, a transition period at the start and the end of the day, a familiar person to meet them, to greet them, to be with them, just to make their day more manageable. On this slide, we've actually got just a sensory wheel, and just to kind of show that there are different sensory sensitivities, and we all have these. So these are surrounding sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, body awareness, movement, internal body awareness. Some children are more sensitive than others. And when we do become stressed, our senses become heightened. So it presents in two ways. We're either oversensitive, so we avoid that sensitivity, or we're undersensitive to it, so we try to seek it out. So an example of avoidance, I'm thinking of my daughter who has an issue with her clothing, a sensory issue. So seams on socks, we've ended up buying seamless socks, but she would not wear them unless the seam was really exact on her toes. She couldn't stand the thought of having them on. So we all have them, but in a neurodiverse child or young person or person, they are more heightened. And moving on to explain this more with the window of tolerance from Siegel. So his theory was that we all have a window of tolerance, and that window is where we are calm enough to be able to learn, be able to experience new things. However, it can go two ways. We can either, if it escalates, we become more vigilant, we become more threatened, and this can then lead to hyperarousal, where we tend to move into that fight state, where we might have outbursts, we're feeling very, very unsafe. Or it can dip into hypoarousal, where we just want to run away, we're flustered, we avoid the situation, or we freeze because we disassociate and it becomes too overwhelming. So the window of tolerance in a young person who is neurodiverse is much smaller than it would be in a comparable child. So we're going to move on now to look at some strategies to support young people with neurodiversity. And we've colour coded these into green proactive strategies. And these are the ones that we want to use to prevent any buildup of stress in the first place. Amber strategies are for when you see that young person, that arousal is starting to build and that stress is starting to build. And then we have reactive strategies, hopefully that we don't have to use as often, but for when stress has reached that crisis peak. So proactive strategies, preventing the stress in the first place, is having that good environment that has all of these things in place. So distraction techniques, breathing techniques, techniques to ground the young person, good self-care, making sure routines for teeth brushing, dressing, just general looking after themselves are in place, and making sure that the young person is getting enough sleep. So a grounding strategy can be a 5-4-3-2-1 technique, taking them right back to the present moment by using their senses. So going over 5 things they can see, 4 things they can feel or touch, 3 things they can hear, 2 things they can smell, 1 thing you can taste. It brings you right back to the present and can often de-escalate the situation. There's also breathing techniques. We have here finger breathing, where we use the index finger to trace round the edges of the fingers on your opposite hand, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and breathing as you go through the first finger, and count 1, 2, 3, 4, and breathe out as you go down the finger. So we repeat until you've traced up and down all 5 fingers, repeating the breathing pattern every time. There's also lots of different breathing techniques, square breathing, infinity breathing. There's probably techniques that you use yourself at home and in the classroom. So it's important to put those reasonable adjustments in place to make sure that we're being proactive. So if they have a coping strategy, make it acceptable if and when you can, if there's no danger, if it's not really negatively affecting anyone else. They like to have routine, structure and boundaries. So a timetable that doesn't deviate from what they've been told, that everything is at the same time and when they expect it to happen. Sensory breaks, brain breaks in response to periods of high distraction or agitation. Avoid labeling if you can. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, that children become what we call them, and we assign a label and it can limit their performance. It's important to embed movement into lessons, allow fidget toys to increase focus, wobble toys, leg shaking under the desk if that's needed. When you're talking one-to-one with a child, try to position yourself side on so that they feel more comfortable. You're at their level. You're avoiding them feeling uncomfortable about not being able to make eye contact with you, because that is something that is very difficult, especially for a neurodiverse young person. So, proactive strategies for sensory difficulties. It's important to remember that if we try and keep the child calm at all times, it's not going to work. So children naturally go up and down in their window of tolerance. It's a natural response, and it will happen throughout the day. So they need access to alerting. So these are more exciting activities, as well as calming and soothing activities. So it can be helpful to develop a routine where you alternate between calming and alerting activities throughout the day. And you'll hear this called a sensory diet. So there'll be periods of the day where children need more calm, possibly at the start of the day, and then periods where they'll need more alerting. So maybe before a thinking task. So just to note, generally rhythmic movement is soothing and calming, whilst erratic movement is alerting and stimulating. So examples for smell, taste, we can use essential oils, frozen warm foods, smell of spices, blowing bubbles, touch, pleasure, a bear hug, a massage, a fidget spinner, stroking a dog or a cat, movement or being body aware, a rocking chair, some yoga, star jumps, running, circuits, looking and vision, lava lamps, looking at nature, a safe space like a dark tent, some dot to dot, and listening auditory strategies, listening to their favourite music, banging on pots and pans, whispering, blowing a whistle. It's important to remember that these strategies will work differently for different young people, and that they may like blowing bubbles, but they may not like blowing a whistle and listening to the sound. They may like colouring or dot to dot, but they may not like a different activity. We're all unique, we're all different, and different things work better for different people. So moving on to amber strategies. This is when that emotional arousal is starting to build, and we want to try to nip it in the bud if we can. So the first thing to do is reduce demands on the young person. Don't ask them to do things that you know they're not able to do. If the work is causing an issue, then they're not going to be able to carry on with it. So distract and redirect where you can. So something that they favour or a soothing activity. So it may be that they just want some time out, or they want to go to a sensory room. Simplify your speech. Repeat, don't rephrase. That's really important. And if they know any relaxation techniques, use these now. So breathing or grounding activities. Remove any triggers if possible. So if there's any other children, any demands on them, which we've said at the very start, any sensory things that can cause a trigger. Have a plan for tricky times of the day. So it may be that you're too busy to deal or to give more one-to-one. Their TA isn't available at that time. They're just coming into school, and have activities ready for those times. And also plan for tricky activities. So you may have an emotional first aid kit or a soothing box available for them to access. So just trying to plan ahead for those amber moments, and then be able to have those things in place, makes a huge difference if you can. Dan Siegel again has a name it to tame it strategy, and this is noticing and labeling emotions as they're happening. In addition to it gives in the moment relief, it also strengthens capacity over time to be with big emotions when they arise, without actually getting swept up in them. So labeling feelings is a tool that has physiological effects on our brains and our bodies. So you can do this by naming the emotion and describing how it shows up in the body. And you can also demonstrate it with your own emotion, and this normalizes the feeling for the child. So it's easier for children to separate themselves from their overwhelming feelings once you give them a name. So on this picture here, there's a few examples. So first of all, step one, we notice changes in the body. So the child may notice that I notice my heart racing. So two, identify the feeling and get specific. I'm feeling nervous and apprehensive. And then three, what is this emotion telling me? What are the needs? What are the values? So it's telling me I care about my job. So there's another example on there as well, but it just helps to provide in the moment relief. And the more we practice this, the better the young person gets at naming, labeling their emotion and being able to tame it. So moving on to reactive strategies, and that's when the stress has reached that peak or we're in crisis. So it's important to have someone nearby at a safe distance. When you get those big feelings, they're very scary. They're so scary for the child, and that's why they can escalate very quickly. So a calm tone of voice and body language, even if you're not feeling it inside, it's important to try to project that to the young person. Tell them what you do want them to do rather than what you don't want them to do. So, for example, hands down rather than don't hit, or take some deep breaths rather than saying don't panic. So, if they're anxious, do not try to reason with them or challenge the fear. Remove other people if you can and make the environment as safe as possible for the child. And use simple reassuring statements such as, I am here, you're okay. And if there are any strategies that you know the child does respond to regulate them, use them. Okay. Hopefully they'd have worked in the amber stage, but use them now if you can and you know that they are effective. So that was a whistle-stop tour of what you can do, and I'm sure that most of you use a lot of those strategies already. What is important though is to access services and support when you do need them. Now, obviously, educational psychologist support, if you do have a child who's autistic or has a learning difficulty, they may have access, well, they may already have one in place, an educational health and care plan. So EHCP, they may need a behaviour support plan. Psychologists will give advice and guidance for schools regarding mental health and neurodiversity. Advanced solutions are amazing, and the support they give for young people with ASD and or ADHD is excellent because it's specialist. There's a helpline anyone can access, even if the child's not actually has a present diagnosis. It could be that they're on the pathway. They still provide support. Teaching staff, parents, there's in-depth staff training to schools and professionals, and there's also parent courses as well. There's the Education Support Partnership, well, Mental Health Foundation, Mind, NHS services, and of course ourselves as a service. If you are a school staff, please do ask your mental health lead to have a chat with us. We are always available. And if you are a parent needing support, talk to your school, who in turn can put you through to services that will help or can put you through to ourselves. And it's really, really important for support for young people that they know that we are available to support. Okay, so there's school staff, there's always pastoral form teachers, their teacher, the mental health support team, which is us, speak to school or school speak to us, Young Minds, Couth, Zuntold is a new service in Knowsley as well that's based on a book and literature approach to supporting mental health. And please call NHS 11 if you are in a crisis or an emergency. That's really important. Again, we have more support on hand from Advanced Solutions, the ADHD Foundation. We've got Special Educational Needs and Disabilities, the SEND, Young Minds, Sendias for parents as well is a really important one, Childline, and of course, Early Help. And I just want to reiterate how important self-care is. How do you look after you? Okay, it's important to think about your own needs. If you've got a sensitive or distressed child in your class, it's really demanding, especially if you've got other commitments like teaching the rest of the class or other children about, if particularly TAs as well, having to deal with that distressed child and everything else going on around. If you are a parent of a neurodiverse child, it's extremely difficult to have time to yourself and to have that self-care. So it's important to remember you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to put yourself first in order to be able to support your child. So I am aware that that was a very quick overview of different presentations and a whistle-stop tour of how you can support them. But I just want you to go back to your score that you gave yourself at the beginning of the webinar on how confident you were surrounding neurodiversity in relation specifically to mental health, if possible. So I want you to rescore 10 being extremely confident and 0 not at all confident. And hopefully there will be an increase in your score. Okay, and moving on, I just want to draw your awareness to upcoming wellbeing webinars. So just like this one, we will be running some more over the rest of the academic year. So we have parenting skills for behaviour coming up in April. In May, emotional regulation, LGBTQ plus in June, and body image in July. They're always going to be on the Tuesday, once a month, 3:30 to around 4:15 p.m. and you can access them via the Zoom link. So please, if you want to attend, email events@merseycare.nhs.uk. This will also be available on our website. And we are currently trialing some really exciting digital workbooks for young people, school staff and parents and carers. So they're helping with different mental health concerns. They're going to be interactive, so you can access online, but there's also the option to print off and use as a manual workbook too. So there's 3 of the titles on the screen now: managing low mood, anxious feelings, staying mentally healthy, but there's going to be lots more for different for secondary, for primary, for parents and carers also. So I just want to draw your attention to those. We're launching them very soon and they will be available on our website. And there we come to the end. I hope you have found something useful in the webinar today. We'd be really grateful if you could provide some feedback so that any future webinars we can try to include your recommendations and make them even better. I'm just going to leave that QR code up for you to access. And again, I'd really like to thank you for your time.